wait a minute. Are you being correct about what great, consistent patriots of this country like Destiny said when they defined what an insurrection? Surely, they didn't define insurrection so broadly that that would be included in what an insurrection is, right? We're going to talk about Democratic insurrection. So there we go. Nord's notes. Let's talk about it, shall we? Democrats have convinced me of the seriousness of insurrection. In fact, the whole lead up into the 2024 election was Democrats constantly relitigating a day that happened 4 years previous on January 6th. And after having debated Democrat after Democrat and seeing the people in the mainstream media, but I repeat myself, they're just Democrats, tell me constantly the seriousness. And people like Adam Kissinger crying and so emotional. It was the darkest day since 9/11, the worst attack on the United States since Pearl Harbor. I'm now convinced insurrections are so horrific, so terrible that we must focus on them for years at a time. It is the only way that we can save our country, by calling out these terrible, terrible insurrections. Now, I've debated a lot of fantastic Democrats, and a lot of them have defined insurrection in different ways. And I argued against this because I thought the definition was too broad. We heard people talk about, well, an insurrection could be if a couple hippies get together and protest marijuana laws and one of them shoves a police officer. That would be an insurrection. And it seemed way too broad. But no, I now realize they were right. We should broaden out that definition of insurrection. After all, it's one of the most terrible, terrible, terrible things that could happen to you as a country. We must fight back against insurrections. I've been convinced they've made a believer out of me. But what is an insurrection? Well, I debated an incredible scholar, just a fantastic person and debater by the name of Destiny, and a lot of his orbiters as well. And they were very articulate using these authors, Bowden Paulson, about what an insurrection was. So here's almost verbatim for my 5.5 hour debate with Destiny, which he rage quit on. Verbatim, how he defined what an insurrection is. One, it's an assemblage of people that are united for a common purpose. Left out the word purpose there, sorry. So in other words, a group of people that are there for the same reason. Got it? Second, they're resisting, I guess, the implementation or the execution of a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. So if they don't like a particular law, if there's a government proceeding like arresting people, certifying an election, whatever, if they're resisting that, that's step 2 to being an insurrection. Third, by way of force or intimidation, if they push security or law enforcement, if they stand there shouting, intimidating things, well, there you go. And lastly, it's for a public purpose. So it can't be for like, we don't like that our friend Jim had his car repoed. It would have to be against repossessions in general, or maybe against a particular government facility or entity or types of laws that are being enforced. That would be an insurrection, anything that met that 4 criteria. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, it seems like that would mean that so many Black Lives Matter protests, so many Antifa protests, Vietnam War protests, and many others would meet the definition of insurrection. And you're right. But as we've already talked about, insurrection is so important that we must resist. We must fight back against these insurrections. The great Democrat icon Destiny made these points in a debate with me, along with so many other amazing Democrat scholars. I consented to debate them, and they were more than happy to share their great wisdom, how this was the criteria for an insurrection. And these same Democrats were also very insistent that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says that anyone who engages in an insurrection should not, and already has federal office, should not be allowed to hold federal office again. That's why they were so insistent that Donald Trump be kicked off the ballot. That's what the Colorado court said, as they tried to remove their opponent, Donald Trump, who would then go on to win that election. You know, it was in the name of democracy that they needed to remove him from the ballot. He engaged in an insurrection. He said words like fight like hell. My goodness, can you believe the horror? One of the darkest days in the history of our country. Today is May 9th, 2025. It's the day it's going to live in infamy in this country. Democrat officials, in one of the worst attacks that we've seen since Pearl Harbor, decided to engage in an insurrection against an ICE facility. They illegally trespassed in that facility, and they assaulted federal law enforcement officials. Only by the grace of God did none of those law enforcement officials die. But we have no idea. Who knows? Maybe a year, 2 years from now, some of those officials could end their own life. And as we know with January 6th, that means that would have been murder by these Democrats, including Democrat officials that engaged in this insurrection. Yesterday, I was all giddy. I came on here to tell you about my 4-year-old, how I took him to his first t-ball practice. I live in rural Pennsylvania. It's so cold here over the winter. We had a lot of snow. We've hit spring. The sun is shining. The leaves are coming out. It's so green. You're on a ball field, kids having fun. That's America. All this diversity, boys, girls, doesn't matter what your pronouns are, playing t-ball on the same team. And I took a deep breath and said, finally, this country's uniting. It's coming back together. This is what this country's about. And now I have to go downstairs and tell my 4-year-old that one of the major political parties in this country just committed an insurrection. I'm shaking, is how scared I am, how furious. I hope that a great leader like Adam Kissinger could get to the television and shed tears to let us know how somber of a day this is. We must fight back against this insurrection. So what can we do? First, all of the Democrat officials that hold office, that engaged in this insurrection, and there are several. The mayor of Newark was one. There were others. All of them should be removed from office and never allowed to run again. When Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was crafted, this is the exact scenario they were talking about. I know, you think they were referencing the Civil War and the fact that no one's been removed from office using these provisions since the times of the Civil War means that we've gotten past that. But no, the Democrats convinced me. They convinced me when it was going against Donald Trump that this is the way. We must do this. We must fight against insurrections. All of the Democrat officials and their minions that were there, these disgusting anti-American insurrectionists, must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Put them in solitary confinement. They tried to overthrow our country. We must start Insurrection Hunter Task Force. Name these people, shame them, get their pictures out there, call their places of employment, arrest every single one of them that participated in this insurrection. We want to know, how did they get there? What bus did they take? What airplane? Where do they do their banking? Just like with the people of January 6th. We must know all of these details. All communications of every single one of these insurrectionists should be investigated by what I hope will be the largest FBI task force in the history of this country. We must do it to protect our country. Who were these people emailing? Who were they calling on the phone? We must know. Who are their neighbors? Did they ever talk to? Leave no stone unturned. No amount of resources are too much for the FBI under Kaj Patel to go after these people. We must set up a congressional committee made exclusively of people that are partisanly against these very Democrats. It should be hiring TV producers to help make this must-see primetime TV. This is the lesson that was learned. This is the standard that the noble Democrats before that were fighting for this country against insurrectionists have set forth. And now how far have the Democrats fallen? Any Democrat who defends this insurrection and talks about the dangers of ICE or the need to repeal laws or ICE facilities being like concentration camps or suggests that it was wrong to arrest these insurrectionists should also be investigated and be removed from office for engaging in an insurrection. We must see their emails. We must know, were they in communication with the insurrectionists? We must know. These are the standards that were set forth. Government needs to be pressuring social media. Places like X, they should be in personal communication with Elon Musk, much like they were with Jack Dorsey and his crew. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, anyone who is now critical of ICE or deportation should be considered dangerous and should not be allowed to say these things online. They must be censored. Much like conversations about the election being stolen circa 2020 had to be censored on social media, so too must the rhetoric of these insurrectionists being critical of ICE. I do not want to hear people saying people were unfairly deported, that their due process rights will be violated. This is the rhetoric of the insurrectionists. It's dangerous and could inspire more insurrectionists. So for the sake of our safety, to ensure that a dark day like this does not happen in our country again, we must censor these people. May 9th, 2025 will go down as one of the darkest days in the history of this country. We must never let Democrats live down the terror they've inflicted. 4 years from now, Every time you hear a Democrat speak up, do you condemn the Democrats' actions on May 9th, 2025? Unlike January 6th, we actually have Democrat politicians who broke the law, terrorizing these ICE agents. Who knows how many of them will take their own life in the future because of the horrors that they saw today. Never let them forget. The midterms, the 2028 election, all of it should be a referendum on the Democrat insurrectionists. It's a dark day. It's tough. And I just want to thank the wonderful Democrats like Destiny that showed me the light. This is the way. And no doubt, you'll see those Democrats, Destiny and all of his orbiters and all the other left-wing streamers and media personalities and politicians and the right-wing, the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kissinger, no doubt, all of them right now. The only reason they haven't issued statements so far is they're so shook. They're probably in the fetal position under their desk crying right now to live through such a horrific insurrection. No doubt, though, by the end of the day, they'll be putting out harsh statements on how they are disgusted by these Democrats that engaged in this insurrection. I know they're people of integrity. It couldn't be possible that their previous claims about insurrection surrounding January 6th were only done so for political reasons, and they actually didn't care about it. Instead, they were just trying to score political points. That couldn't be possible. There's no way these people like Destiny have too much integrity, and all of his orbiters, many of which who I debated. These are people of integrity. I suppose Destiny will also say now Democrats are effing around and finding out if they go to Democrat events and people use physical violence against them. That's how much consistency and integrity that people like Destiny and these Democrats have. And I don't want to hear, oh, but it was, it wasn't that bad. Don't even belittle what this insurrection was. I don't want to hear it. Oh, but they didn't have weapons. How many of them had pens in their pockets? Those are piercing weapons. How many used their fists as bludgeoning weapons? We just found out that the popes, for the first time from America, may God shine his light down on us on such a terrible day. Now, I know a lot of people are asking, well, what happened? So I'm going to play you a video. Now, I'm going to ask, please, any children in the room, please ask them to leave. This is going to be really difficult to watch. Your country being attacked in such a way by actual politicians elected in this country. It's hard to watch. So give everyone a chance. Give everyone a chance to clear out the room of all the children, faint of heart. Okay. Now there's multiple clips, but I only have the stomach to show you this one. I want you to focus on this woman in red. She's an elected Democrat official, congressperson. Watch how she brutally puts her hands on these federal officials, other people in these crowds, putting their hands on assaulting federal officials. Where's the tear gas? Why aren't these officials launching tear gas at these people? That was the lesson of January 6th, right? Why aren't they beating them with clubs? That's how we do things, right? My goodness, they were going after officials. We know what the answer to Ashley Babbitt was, don't we? But hey, I'm glad they were able to stop this insurrection without using violence. But we saw those Democrats assaulting him. Now, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute. Are you being correct about what great, consistent patriots of this country like Destiny said when they defined what an insurrection? Surely, they didn't define insurrection so broadly that would be included in what an insurrection is, right?
What is the, hold on, let me find my, okay, I think I had 4 points for mine. I think one is you have an assemblage of people that are usually united for a common purpose. You've got, you're resisting, I guess, like the implementation or the execution of a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. You are doing this by way of force or intimidation, and it's for like a public purpose, like some kind of like public grievance or whatever, not to like protest like a particular like outcome of a particular court trial or something.
Okay, so let's go back to that slide, shall we? Assemblage of people that are united for a common purpose. Yep, they were all there to protest ICE, Donald Trump's deportation policies. Second, resisting, I guess, like the implementation or execution of a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Yep, they were trying to stop the detention of people that were being taken to this ICE facility to be processed for deportation. They're also protesting against Donald Trump's lawful deportation orders. Third, by way of force or intimidation. Yep, they're shoving law enforcement. They blatantly trespassed, which itself is an act of intimidation, breaking the law in order to get in the face of these people. They used force in the point of putting their hands on people for a public purpose. Absolutely. It's for the public purpose of changing the law and stopping these deportations. That's an insurrection. What you just saw was an insurrection. Was it an assemblage of people united for a common purpose? Yep. Were they resisting the implementation or execution of a particular law? Yep. The deportation laws that Trump's using. Were they interfering with the courts of a government proceeding? Yes. The government's procedure of detaining and then deporting the people. What they did was they waited till the fence opened where a bus that was bringing illegals in for the process of being deported was coming through. Then the gate opened to allow the bus in, and they charged through and trespassed. Did they use force or intimidation? Yep. The mere fact that they broke the law to trespass, was in the face screaming of these ICE officials, and was actually putting their hands on them, shows that they were using both force and intimidation. And was it for a public purpose? Absolutely. They were there for the public purpose of stopping the deportations, protesting against Trump's laws on these deportation, and ICE that's acting them out. That's an insurrection. What you just saw was an insurrection. May 9th, 2025, one of the darkest days in the history of our country, an insurrection, literally engaged with the mayor of Newark, that's a Democrat, at least one Democrat member of Congress, who herself was putting their hands on government officials, law enforcement officials. That's an insurrection. Now, I know what the Democrats are going to say. Come on, Rob, this wasn't a big deal. Oh, no. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment makes no qualification for how serious the insurrection had to be. In fact, if you go back to that very same character, Destiny, that man of integrity, after January 6th first happened, he said, clearly this wasn't an insurrection. It was a protest that then some people rioted and it got a little out of control. But they overwhelmed police so much that clearly if they wanted to do more harm, they would have done so. That was Destiny's take immediately following January 6th, before he realized that he could use it as a political cudgel to demonize his opponents. What was the result of the insurrection of January 6th? Largest task force in FBI history, demonizing Donald Trump and all of his supporters, ruining anyone's lives through insurrection hunters that were looking for people's face, connecting anyone that went there as somehow engaged in some sort of violent terroristic act, even though the vast majority of people didn't even trespass, let alone break the law and use violence or anything of that nature. Censorship of people on social media that wanted to talk about what they saw as problems with the 2020 election. Because now, if you were talking about that, oh boy, rhetoric like that led to an insurrection. And I debated these people over and over. The truth of the claims was irrelevant as to whether or not that rhetoric could incite insurrection. So the people that will say, well, Trump lied about the 2020 election being stolen, but these Democrats are correct about the inhumane position of deporting. How do we know? You might say, yes, but upon further investigation, we saw all sorts of connections and things that were occurring with the January 6th insurrection. For example, we know the Proud Boys were involved, and we know what their communications were. And we know the Oath Keepers were involved, and we know what their communication. And we know what people like Trump were saying in the days before. Right, that's because we did a massive FBI investigation, and we did a massive January 6th committee. No reason to not do that here, correct? No one's above the law, right? That's the standard that was set forth. If any of these people had pens or flags, those are weapons. Those are potential weapons. That was the standard we set on January 6th, right? Maybe some of them had a pocket knife in their pocket. Oh boy, lethal weapon. That's the standard that was set forth. We must hyperventilate. How about this? What if a law enforcement official that was there today takes their own life months in the future? According to the standard that was set forth, we heard, who was it, Elizabeth Warren saying recently, officers were murdered there. They cite like 5 officers. One of them died of natural causes the next day. They were unable to connect it to the events of January 6th. The rest took their own lives months in the future. But we were told, well, it was because of January 6th. Why shouldn't that same standard be given here? If Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection by just saying, go march peacefully, then surely these Democrats that were on the ground trespassing, using violence and intimidation to engage in an insurrection, surely they engaged in an insurrection. No one is above the law. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is quite simple. If you engaged in an insurrection and you hold office, you're ineligible to continue to hold that office or to run again. If Trump saying fight like hell and talking positively about the people on January 6th meant he was engaging in an insurrection, then wouldn't the Democrats that are out there today saying things like abolish ICE after this insurrection also be engaging in an insurrection, which would mean that they also can't hold public office any further? That's the standard, right? But Rob, what January 6th was the worst thing ever. It was the worst. They almost overthrew our country. They almost overthrew it. Every time I point out they didn't come close to overthrowing our country, every single Democrat I've debated says, oh, so only if it was close to succeeding do we count it as an insurrection? Same thing here.